It's easier when you want to talk.
Yeah.
Just,
So with that, I'm going to mute everybody and get started here. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Obviously, I wish that we could be physically together in the guild room, sharing breakfast and ideas and love with each other. So if you could kind of walk through me a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about the world right now because it's crazy and Grace's place within it. Um, First, let's start with an acknowledgement of how hard the last couple of months have been, and in particular, the last couple of weeks. We started with literal physical separation during the COVID lockdown, and that eventually gave way to a mass acknowledgement of the mental separation that people have made manifest in the racist undercurrents of our society. It's really been an incredible journey we've been on as a country. The undercurrent of it all, and to me, the net result has been over these last couple of months a constant emphasis on separation and fear. Um, and when you hold those words, that separation and fear, your heart aches and your heart breaks. And we've been subjected to it consistently over this time. Um, when your heart aches that way, looking at what's happening, and you focus on those words, separation and fear, and those feelings, your heart's breaking because your soul knows better, right? Your soul knows that separation and fear are not our natural state. Now, what's the opposite of separation and fear? It's connectedness and love. And during the COVID lockdown, when we had our physical separateness, you could see people striving for connectedness in all sorts of different ways. You saw air hugs and video conferencing and drive-by birthday parties, or in my backyard anyways, there was over-the-fence playtime with neighbors, literally separated by the fence. At Grace, we've been doing a lot of the same striving for connectedness. We have our streaming Sunday services. Everything we've done has basically been online, and we turned it all online on a dime, including everything to a virtual altar watch during Holy Week. We have our Zoom Bible studies on Wednesdays. Reverend Donna is starting Zoom Compline services Mondays, Wednesdays, Friday evenings at 9 o'clock. There's been weekly choir Zoom calls, so everybody in the choir has been getting together on Wednesday evenings. The Zoom Spirited Women's meetings that I know Allison doesn't miss on Saturday mornings. And I'll admit that I've listened in every now and then from across the room, and they've been wonderful discussions. Daily morning prayer calls. Really, if you look at it, I'll defer to some folks who've been around a lot longer than I have, but I don't know if there's been more ways to connect on a weekly basis through Grace than we have now, even though we are not allowed to get together physically. And when you look at the views on our services on YouTube or on Facebook, we're actually regularly reaching more people. We're getting more views than we had in our previous average Sunday attendance. That just goes to show how much the world's changing and how much Grace Church is having to change with it. It really has been a rebirth of our church. And when I look at that, I look at the readings from today, how appropriate is it that today on our first reading, our first day officially back in the church for service, the first reading was the creation story. Grace is being reborn. It's a new creation with so many different ways to find connectedness. And when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, indeed, love finds a way. So during the last couple of weeks, however, we've been reminded of how profoundly different the experiences of so many of our brothers and sisters are from our own. And that goes well beyond the recent deaths of George Floyd and others. So I want to tell a couple stories. One, a person in our Hinsdale community felt that he actually had to visit the police station upon moving into our area so that they would know that he lives here. He's African American. In another example, my wife's friend had actually arranged for them to go see a friend's daughter's school musical. And when they arrived, the person who greeted them just assumed that Allison made the reservations and not her African American friend. It's those subtle experiences of sliding and otherness that add up over time to a fundamentally different experience for different groups of people. And those differences in experience are born out of a perceived separation. It's a mental construct of otherness that we're recognizing is actually built into the very fabric of our society. But just like the coronavirus separation, love finds a way. What's giving me hope in these times is that the conversations I'm hearing are no longer just simply a denunciation of racism. Racism's bad. That's obvious, and I think everybody very readily gets behind that. What's interesting and inspiring is that the conversations are instead more about a mature understanding of how we have these pre-programmed subtle reactions to a perceived other that do end up resulting in this fundamentally different experience for so many of our brothers and sisters in Christ. By seeing it this way, my hope and what I think will happen is that many will be inspired through knowing about this connectedness of all of us in love, that they will do the work of undoing that subtle programming, that recognizing those thoughts and wondering where those thoughts come from that result in different experiences for different people. That truly is spiritual work. Christ said, know thyself. That's the work that we're being called on as a country, to raise our consciousness. And I truly believe that this is nothing short of a fundamental shift in consciousness towards Christ consciousness, that same Christ consciousness that Father Chris and Reverend Donna remind us of so often. It's a pure movement. It's an overcoming of separation and fear in favor of connectedness and love. At the vestry level, pre-COVID in February, we had a meeting where all we did was talk about all the different ways that Grace Church can evolve and grow with the Holy Spirit to help each other grow in exactly that understanding of the mutual indwelling of Christ, which is the foundation of the connectedness and love that is in all things. Had that conversation in February, we talked about streaming, we talked about podcasting, we talked about new ministries, new ways to gather, and also a discussion about how our worship space might change to support this mission. You see, everything that we do, at least everything that I do in connection with Grace Church, is thinking about how do we embody this connectedness and love that really is the mutual indwelling of Christ. How do we wake people up to that reality? It's that is the spirit and the theology behind the proposal to move the altar forward. If our understanding of the divine is that Christ lives in each of us at our core, then we are fundamentally connected to each other at our deepest selves. Christ says that the kingdom of heaven is within, and any separation is just human perception. So our spiritual work is all about lessening this perception of separation that ultimately leads to fear. Our spiritual work is about remembering the connectedness. Right now, our altar table is actually very separate from the body of Christ, us. And celebrating Eucharist in a place that's several yards away from the nearest pew, and in a place where about a third of our available seating in the transepts can't see it at all, to me is the antithesis of what we're living into as a church body, which is our understanding of the divine, that we have this intimacy with God. Our physical space right now with the pew, with the altar where it is, there's some sense of maybe we're not embodying the intimacy that we know we have with God. I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging the way our church is right now, or imply that we couldn't feel connectedness with God with our current configuration. Of course we can, and of course we have. The question is whether what we're doing right now and still have a traditional approach, because we are a traditional church, can we carry that forward, our tradition, include it with what we do, and yet evolve? That's what the Spirit continually calls us to, is this evolution, a transformation. And in this case, we see that there's a transformation with our physical space that we think is a physical reflection of our spiritual beliefs. Father Chris strongly believes, and I agree, that our worship space should reflect our values, that of connectedness and love. By placing the altar between the transepts, similar to many other traditional churches, the entirety of our congregation will not only finally be able to visually participate in the Eucharist, but also be much physically closer to it. Our worship will more physically reflect that knowing of the divine as being as close to us as our breath. As we've debated all of this, and I've had to go into the church from time to time during the lockdown to sign checks and things like that, I'll go and stand in the place where we're proposing to move the altar, and we actually have taped out the space on the floor. It's a powerful experience. When you stand in that place and you look to your left and you see our beautiful stained glass windows, and you can feel into the energy of the people sitting in that transept, and you do the same, you look to your right and you see the beautiful stained glass window in the east transept, feel into the people sitting there, and you look forward, and again, the beautiful stained glass windows that we have in the north side of our worship space, you feel that energy come together. And then you imagine the choir behind giving their gifts in worship and feeling all of that focus in on that space. It's actually a powerful experience. Our church is open now. And so if any of you want to go to the church and stand in that space and feel what that's like, I invite you to do so. I do think it's a powerful experience to feel that. So I'm going to take a minute and share my screen, and I want to share a drawing of our church floor plan. This is the current version of our church floor plan.
We can't see the people.
Let me make it a little bit bigger. And so currently our altar is in the far southern reaches of our sanctuary here. Choir area is here. What we're proposing to do is take the altar table from here and move it forward to about where the first and second pews currently sit, and right in between the stained glass windows on either side. What we would then have to do is remove the first 4 and maybe 5 rows of pews. We'll see. When we do the move, we'll see if we want to take out this 5th row or not. And then have an open space here in the middle. The conversations that we've had, one more thing I wanted to note, we actually have room in this west transept. We might move one of these pews over here to give us a little additional seating in the west transept. Arguably, we could probably fit 2 rows, but I do like the idea of having some open space. As most of you know, that area is basically family seating. And so it's not a bad idea to have some open space in that area. The vestry's talked a lot about this. We've talked about this over the last 3 meetings, in fact. Talked about different facets of it. One of the proposals was to have a platform here that would move everything up just vertically, or even a smaller platform in the middle. We've discussed buying chairs that would go around in this empty space. But through all those discussions, we've eventually landed on what I think is the simplest proposal. Both because it makes sense to move incrementally, and I think it's the most fiscally responsible approach. To give you a sense of how much this is going to cost, the movers to move the pews and move the altar table down, that's about $300. We are going to have to repair the floors where the current pews are bolted down. I don't know how much that'll cost, but we don't expect that to be significant. The other thing we'd like to do is add some lighting onto where we're proposing to move the altar. Also, we think that'll be very inexpensive because when you look to the ceiling, there's already electrical there. We don't have to run electrical. We're not going to have to spend a lot of money on an electrician. It's just a matter of purchasing some modest lighting and mounting it, which is why in the letter we think this will be less than $1,000 total. Current plan is to move the pews probably to the guild room for temporary storage. As we get used to it and get used to what it feels like. And then we'll decide what to do with them. If we decide that this is the permanent move, which I hope and I think is the right thing, then we'll find a place to move the pews. I alluded to the finances, and so from that perspective, I do want to share our income statement, if I can find that. There it is. So here's where we are right now, and I know that this is on people's minds because part of the coronavirus impact has been very much an economic impact as well. So this is our income statement through May. We just got this week, obviously. I want to highlight a couple of things. First, our pledges, our collection on pledges. It's been very up and down. Pre-COVID, we were collecting higher than we normally do. March came along and our pledge collection plummeted. April, I think people kind of adjusted and felt comfortable again. We actually had a very good collection month in April. May, we've plummeted yet again. When you average it all out, we're looking at about collecting 10% less than normal. I don't know if we have enough data to really say that that's what we can expect throughout the year. As most of you know, we end up usually having a big collection push at the end of the year. So we really don't know how much of this we're going to collect, and we don't know how much this significant economic impact on our parishioners will translate into a reduced ability to collect pledges. So right now, I think the vestry is kind of thinking, yeah, we're probably not going to collect as much as we thought, maybe 10%, maybe not. We're keeping an eye on it. We have, however, seen an incredible outpouring of gratitude or of generosity, for which I'm very much thankful, and so is the whole church, in non-pledge offerings. For example, we've had former parishioners who have been logging into our services and giving and saying, thank you so much. I've moved away and I'm still able to be connected. And we've had other very generous giving along the way. And so it may very well be that over the course of the year, our non-pledge offerings do make up for some of our shortfall in our pledges. The other thing, there's a couple of other things. One, we have had people give specifically for COVID-19 relief. And so we're holding that aside for now to give both for paying people and for some of the changes we're having to make, like we've had to buy thermometers for when phase 4 comes along. We've had to buy all sorts of the antiseptic rub, gloves, all of that kind of thing. And so we are experiencing some increase in expenses in preparation for phase 4. And then the other thing to report is that we did apply for and receive a PPP loan through the federal government program. We actually received a little over $132,000 for that. What you see in the income statement here is how much of that we've already applied to our salaries over the last month and a half. Some of it's been applied to the academy salaries because we have paid all of our teachers through all of this as well. And then we have some on our balance sheet that is set aside for the next couple of months of salaries. So we do expect, we've been very careful to document all of this, so we do expect to be able to apply to turn this into a grant instead of a loan. So when you add it all up, we have to be careful, but I actually think this year will be okay financially. Assuming we're able to continue living into, as a parish, that spirit of generosity. We can't do this without all of you, with what you give, both in your time, your efforts, and in treasure. And so I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of where we are right now financially as we're walking into this. We're going to keep a close eye on this. Like I said, at fourth quarter, we don't know what's going to happen. But for right now, 2020 seems to be okay. 2021 may be a different story, and it may not be until then that we really see the impact. We'll see what our stewardship campaign looks like in the fall. So real quick, I want to talk a little bit about how things will be different as we open up to phase 4 and then eventually phase 5. You've heard Father Chris talk about this multiple times. I want to kind of remind everybody of that. Right now we're in phase 3. Today was our first day in church in phase 3 under the diocesan rules. We're only allowed 10 people in the church at a time. When you add up Donna, Chris, Andrew, John Robinson's behind the scenes uh, controlling the webcasting aspect. You heard Julie there. We use up most of our people just to make the service available for all of us to enjoy. So we're not opening up the church to people just yet for Sunday services. We have been talking about, are there other smaller services? Because we are allowed 10 people to be in the space. We haven't decided what we're going to do with that in phase 3, but that's a possibility that we're discussing. Phase 4, we get 50 people. That's a little bit more complicated. We'll have to take people's temperatures as they walk in the door. We got to figure out what that looks like. We did buy the little forehead thermometers so that we'll be ready. We don't know what it's going to look like in terms of counting heads, or we're going to have to have people sign up. I don't know. The other thing we're discussing is part of what we put into motion in February before all of this was we were going to put big screens in the parish hall. And the idea would be we could stream the service into the parish hall and double our capacity. We could have 50 people in the parish hall, 50 people in the sanctuary. We have to be careful because the diocesan guidelines have other restrictions, such as only one point of entry, one point of exit. We're working through all of that, and these are some of the issues that we're planning ahead for. More practically speaking, our church is going to be fundamentally different in a lot of different ways. Communion distribution is going to be different. Moving the altar down provides some side benefits beyond what I think are the theological reasons for moving the altar down. People won't need to go up the stairs and touch the handrails. They won't have to go up to the communion rail, touch the communion rail to receive communion. And I think that that's going to be mandated by the church as we come out of the COVID lockdown, as we move forward into phase 4. And so this altar move will actually have some benefits with respect to a COVID perspective. We'll have more space, as you saw, in the middle of the church for distancing for our altar party. So I think that will be one of the benefits of moving the altar down, just a side benefit, not the main reason. There's no cafe. You can't do a cafe right now. We've been working with Yej and Aaron to figure out other ways that we can incorporate that mission. We're thinking about doing some box takeaways. We're working with it, and we're figuring that out as well. Bigger picture, church shopping is going to be fundamentally different. And this is really a driver for our conversations at the vestry. When you think about church shopping, you move into a new area, you look around online a little bit, you might talk to some neighbors and ask around, but eventually what really is about church shopping is going to the space on Sunday morning, seeing the service, feeling the people. And we have been completely unable to do that for 2.5 months. We're unable to do it for all of phase 3. And how many families are going around church shopping with masks on in phase 4? And I don't know what our numbers are going to look like. I fully expect our numbers to be way, way down. I've had lots of conversations with people that just say they're not going to come to church until the COVID's completely gone. And I totally understand that. That's why we're going to continue streaming even when we come back. I also think that there's people that are probably really comfortable with streaming and may choose to just participate that way instead of being physically present. So our church is really going to be fundamentally different. Because of all that, our online investment is absolutely huge. I'm so proud of how much we've been able to transition to things online and how much we're able to give online. Superb efforts by Reverend Donna, the Pierce family for taking us into their homes every Sunday morning during all of this. Julie and Ansley and Emery and Ellen being our readers, Julie with singing, manning the iPhone. Andrew has been instrumental and huge in playing the music, playing piano during the services. Allison coordinating all of this and communicating all of this. But I think we're just scratching the surface of what we're capable of. And these are the conversations we had at our last vestry meeting that I think are really exciting. We talk about how best can we continue to find our connectedness and love. And so we're talking about podcasting. We're talking about other ways that our different ministries can have an online presence that continue to give and continue to spread our message of love. And that's why I'm going to go back to the start, where it is all about connectedness and love. And, I truly believe that we have to continue to live into and lean into this spirit of growth and evolving. Father Chris alluded to it today in his opening remarks in our streaming service. The Episcopal Church is fading away, and it's really incumbent to be looking at all the different ways that we can bring forward to share our love and our understanding of the divine with as many people as we can. We must move boldly. Otherwise, we'll just fade away. That's what we're looking at. So it was in that context the vestry had several conversations over the last 3 meetings about the altar move in the context of all of these other issues. This was not the only thing on the table. And so that's why we went forward with what we have. The proposal before us is, I think, the least financially impactful way to live into our vision of having our worship space reflect that connectedness that our world needs right now. And so it was a result of all those conversations that we got to the point of feeling comfortable that we could bring that forward to you today. I want to acknowledge some of the feedback I've received regarding this. One piece of this is that I really do acknowledge the deep connectedness that so many of you have with the physical space of our church. So many of you have been touched by the divine in our space as it is, and indeed been comforted by it. And I honor that experience. And that's why we have moved slowly and deliberately through this process. I did not want to just bring forward this idea without making sure that it had been thought through and debated and really made sure that this was the right thing to move forward with. Some folks have said that we should have brought this forward sooner, but I do think that would have been irresponsible, because if we had just brought it forward without having debated it, without having thought it through, it would have been, it wouldn't have been the right thing. It would not have been good leadership. So in that spiritedness of connectedness and love, we thought it through, we discussed it, and this is our opportunity to have the conversation, to bring forward this fully thought out proposal to the parish, and then listen. I understand that in normal times, we'd be having this conversation in church. We'd be having it in the hallways. We'd be having it at cafe. And we'd be doing this over time. And I still want to hear from you. Unfortunately, Zoom, for all that it is a poor substitution. It's the best we have. In a minute, I'm going to ask for questions and hear from some of you. If at the end of all this, you still feel like you haven't been heard, please reach out to me or Mike or a vestry member. And I'm going to share my screen real quickly again. So Mike and I are happy to talk with any of you. Read your emails, call us, or if you don't want to talk to me or Mike, you can contact any of our vestry members. And we want to hear your feedback. So we do have a vestry meeting tomorrow, but the altar table move is not on the agenda. Tomorrow's vestry meeting is more financial. I'm going to go deeper into the financials I just showed you. We have other issues to discuss. But we will be having another meeting in 2 weeks, June 22nd, where we will be talking about the altar move. And again, in the broader context of the other issues that we're debating in terms of how do we continue to expand and grow and provide as many ways to share our message as we can. And so I do encourage you to talk to us and give us your feedback over that time. With that, just want to summarize one last time. Everything that we're doing is really in the service of love. We don't always get it right, but now more than ever, and again, it's amazing how our Sunday readings line up with the issues in our lives. Today's gospel said that we need to listen to each other and get along and emphasize that connectedness that's among us all through that divine that's within. So thank you for hearing me out on this. If anybody wants to talk, if you want to either raise their hand or kind of wave at me, and then you can unmute yourself and we can start our conversation. Dirk, go ahead. I think you can unmute yourself, or maybe I can. I don't know if I can. Let me try.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Great.
Great. Just a question, Nick. When people come for communion, do they just stand, walk by, or do they kneel? Is there an opportunity to kneel as we've always done? Or will we just, to me, sort of look like the Catholic Church where we walk up the center aisle and, take the sacraments and then walk back to our seat?
You want me to talk about that, Nick?
Yes, if you could.
Yeah, so essentially to say look like the Catholic Church, if you have that in your mind's eye, that's basically correct. Not allowed to kneel at an altar rail because it involves touching. And so in the short run, well, I can't say short run. So phase 5 begins to have other considerations about an altar rail. And when is phase 5 going to happen? When, to date, the statement from the diocese, which is different from the state, Jeff Lee has been much more aggressive at this point than the state. So at what point will you be in phase 5? Phase 5 says you're inoculated, and I believe I heard the bishop say that they're all about being adverse to liability. And so issues of taking temperature and proof of inoculation and all these things have come up. Some of it's a lot of it's ridiculous maybe, but we're trying to be careful and cautious. And so Dirk, it's a long way to say you can anticipate receiving, and the clergy are under strict instructions about how to do that. The chalice will not be offered only to the celebrant, not even to the rest of the party. You notice today Donna did not touch the chalice, and nor did I touch the elements, which is a part of our theology because the rubrics say it must be touched. And so a lot of these things have been in this time period have been rewritten to understand. So the bottom line is, yes, you can anticipate coming up with 6-foot intervals to receive, much like in your mind's eye that the Catholic Church would receive only from the celebrant. If we celebrate in 2 different rooms, that Nick talked about having the possibility of having 50 people in the parish hall and 50 people in the worship space, they have to be 2 different celebrants for distribution, cannot be the same person. So the restrictions, here's what I hope, despite the altar move or not, if we survive, it's going to be a miracle. This is going to rip the church apart beyond all measures, and how we figure that out and survive will be huge. We can't sing until stage 5. What we did today was a modified singing, which we bent the rules a little bit. We shouldn't have, but we said because most of us have been together for 2.5 months, we took a calculated risk to have Julie sing. The choir's gone. There's no congregational singing until phase 5. So I don't want you to be alarmed, but I want you to be duly attuned to being appropriately aggressive about how we design worship and our time together. And what's really disturbing is to a priest, when we were locked out of our church and couldn't get at an altar. That defines us. The altar defines a priest. So it's going to be a long, hard road unless tomorrow something magical happens, which would be pretty cool. So I'm sorry, Dirk, that's the long way to say I'm going to hand it to you very carefully.
Thank you.
With love.
Indeed. Let's see, Betsy.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
I feel that the online presence is a way for people to church shop and could be very, very effective. I also feel from some experiences with evangelical Bible school for my granddaughter, that mixing it up, bringing the altar down. I don't like the screen dropping down, but you know, you can do so much and people can be so close. And being medically quarantined myself, I won't be back into church until there's an effective vaccine. And each Sunday, I go to at least 4 church services. And there's so much that can happen. If we can't have a choir in church, you can have a virtual Zoom choir. I've seen this at other churches where they're from their home. So even though there will be no wind instruments or singing, you could do that virtually. And maybe we would have a screen. But the thought of this furniture move is not new. It's been thought of from 15 years ago. And there seem to have been, you know, one crisis after another that the rector has not been bold enough and the vestry has not been bold enough to say now is the time. But now is the time. And our love is what's important.
Thank you, Betsy. You're exactly right. It is the love that's important. Love knows no physical distance. Love knows no separation. A couple
And
of,
can I just add?
please.
The Episcopal Church acknowledges spiritual communion, where you do not have to receive the elements.
Of course. It's beautiful. I want to follow up on a couple of things you said. One, yes, online is absolutely huge. One thing I didn't mention is we are redesigning our website. We're working with John Robinson to embed our services into our website so that you don't have to go to Facebook or YouTube. But we're getting there. We're getting close. We're almost there. Like I said, church shopping is fundamentally different. Our online presence is going to be absolutely critical, no question. One of the fun things that we're debating at the vestry is how can each of our ministries have an online presence, things you may not think about, ways to share who we are and share that love. Really important. The other thing that you mentioned that maybe I didn't touch on enough is moving the altar forward does give us quite a bit of flexibility. The original altar on the far south wall is going to stay, and everything there is going to stay. The communion rail is going to stay. So we actually get a lot of flexibility in ways that we can worship. Father Chris has envisioned potentially having a small wedding or other small service up at the original altar in that space in the southern end of our church. That could be beautiful and really intimate. And the same thing with that space around where the altar we're proposing to move it down to. There'll be a lot of empty space there. I do think eventually we'll want some chairs that look right, that are wooden chairs that fit the look of our church, our traditional look, that we can shape and move around in different ways and have very intimate services there around the altar that our space right now just doesn't really allow. And so there's flexibility to how we express ourselves that come out of this that I know is a big part of what Father Chris is looking at it. And in our discussions, I think are definitely a positive for what we're talking about doing. Betsy, yes, one more comment.
Sure. When you talked about the vestry meetings, I know in the past when there has been controversy, we had invited people to attend the vestry meetings. Is it possible that portions of vestry meetings could be Zoomed or make it more accessible for people to hear about what is going on?
Yeah, so there are 2 aspects to that. One is in the new website, I want to be publishing all of our agendas and our minutes so that everybody has access to all of those. I'll admit, sometimes I don't get the agenda out until very shortly before the meeting. That happens sometimes. So shame on me. But that's part of what I want the website to be, is much more open to everybody. We have been Zooming. All of our investor meetings since COVID have been via Zoom. So it's very easy for people to get on. It's true, I haven't shared the links, but we have invited some people. Like for example, tomorrow Dirk's no longer on vestry, but he's part of our outreach, and he's going to be part of our discussion because we're looking at evolving outreach and how does outreach change in a COVID world. Megan and Julie are going to be at vestry tomorrow to talk about Academy. I think, I look over at my wife, I think we do say when vestry meetings are, and if anybody ever wants to attend, they're not closed, and I'm happy to invite them in.
Well, I think you should make that known.
Yep. Let's see, I think I saw Christine Hosseller and Suzanne Fisher. Christine, why don't you go, and then we'll pass it over to Suzanne.
Hey, everybody. I just want to say a thumbs up and a great job for Steve and Beth Wearsome today on the readings. It was awesome. I'm sure that was technically a little bit of a challenge, maybe not. It was really, really, really good. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And
also, Christine, what you didn't know is that the psalm was remote music too. Andrew sang the psalm earlier the week, so that was, we were testing remote singing. The idea that Betsy brought up that we're going to have to look at that. So that was almost seamless in my experience sitting there, but he didn't sing it today.
I thought the streaming today was really good. Obviously, there's some tweaks. It was louder, slower, whatever, and I'm sure you'll get that feedback. But I thought a really good job was had by all, and I just want to say again, thumbs up on the readings. I thought it was really, really good. And that's it. I might have to zoom out here in a second, going on a hike with the 24-year-old.
Wonderful. Suzanne Fisher, I know you had your hand up earlier.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for all the thought you've put into all of this. And, one of the things I'm thinking about is with the work that the Spirited Women are doing, we're focused on the Enneagram and the personality types. And we've had so many great conversations, and this idea of bringing the altar closer to us and being closer to God is sort of right in line with it. But what we also are learning about others is that some people maybe aren't as open to change. And so you mentioned one of the ideas is letting people come in and just experience that feeling of how that altar feels right in the middle. I'm just wondering what we can maybe think about doing to help others that might sort of see this change as difficult. One idea would even though I know under COVID there's limited ability for people to gather, but is there a rehearsal of sorts for some of those who want to sort of just experience it? For those folks who maybe need a little bit more help managing through what might be an emotional, might be a spiritual change.
Let me answer that. I think that it's a great idea, and in particular, as Nick talked about, when he was walked in the space, and picture it, it has a certain positive energy to it. Definitely, when the altar comes down, I hope that there's a strong conviction when you stand there and say, yes. I believe so much so that after a period of time, we'll wonder how we ever did it the way we did it, with everything pushed up to the south, as Nick, with Bruce's drawing, demonstrated. The challenge with I have to say the church is not open in the sense that you can't come in, because every time somebody comes in, we have to disinfect. So we have to think about a way to have people experience it. But every time we do it, we're obligated, according to the state and the diocese, to clean the space, note who's come in. Because if X person comes in and we have a hit of COVID-19, we have to notify everybody that's been in our space. So it's not quite as easy as saying just come on in, but perhaps we can think of ways or time periods where perhaps 10 people at a time could come in, because that's where we're at. But every single person that comes in, we're obligated to disinfect again. I mean, that's a little crazy, but that's how it is. Now, when you get to the stage where you can have 50 at a time, we still have to disinfect, but that's a larger number being able to come into the space. If that helps at all.
And I see John Robinson's comment that we could maybe do a virtual video tour We could try that. I don't think that's as moving as actually standing in the space. As I mentioned, we actually have it taped out where we want to move the altar on the floor. It is something to kind of stand there, but that's a good comment, Suzanne and John. It might be worth doing something like that. We can give that a shot.
Nick,
Yes.
I want to say something about, I talked to my friend in Florida, and Florida is a little, what are you doing? A little further ahead than we are in Illinois, and they can have more people in the church. And what they're doing is that people make reservations, and the priest went around and put the people's names in different places where they could, where they were to sit when they came into the church. And she said they've been at it for 2 Sundays now, and it's worked out really well. This is an Episcopal church in Florida. The other thing I wanted to say about Betsy's comment about the music, Max and I have been worshiping since the closure of churches with Trinity Lutheran in Evanston with our daughter. And they have musicians come. They have a guitarist, they have a flute player, they've had different musicians to play, and of course they're standing there alone, so they're not infecting anybody else. And so there's a lot of things that you can do with music to make it more interesting. And so that's just one of my comments. With having that wide open space up there, you can have some musicians and they're not standing together. And they've even had a person come and sing along with the hymns, standing at the lectern and singing.
Well, much as Julie did this morning.
Yeah, and it really makes it nice. Makes a nice service. And also they encourage people ahead of time to get your wine or your juice and your bread and put it out, and when they have the elements, and Max and I have been doing that, and I feel like I've been taking communion. So
Actually, they do it.
I'm sorry, I just want to say briefly, is that we're not under the Lutheran guidelines, and the state of Florida has been has been an interesting case study in lots of ways, but we're under what the bishops of the Diocese of Chicago dictates. And even today, I'll tell you, we bent the rules a little bit. So I think it's right in terms of how we can present music, but there's also a tremendous amount of restriction about how it's done in the space. Now, doing it outside the space, there are state restrictions, but the restrictions aren't the same that the bishop of the diocese puts in. So we're trying to navigate that. It's not about not being creative. It's about holding 2 manuals, actually 3 manuals, the CDC, the state, and the bishop, and trying to navigate the best way we can with those 3 manuals. So, but thank you.
And there is absolutely room for playing and innovation here. But as Father Chris says, our hands are triply tied, and it's been a really tough road for us to try to figure all that out. But we're going to try, we're doing our best. Michelle James, I don't think you said you wanted to say something.
Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you all.
Yes, it is.
I got to be honest with you, when you first sent the letter, I was probably one of those people that was against the idea. But listening to all of you, it makes a lot of sense to me. And while you were speaking, I was doing a little search on my computer because I seem to remember in England and a lot of the visiting of churches we did, Robin and I did, that they do have altars that are more centrally located with the choir behind, and other situations like that. So I think that's a great idea. I never understood why our children are shuttled to the West Transit. We never put our kids there. As far as I'm concerned, if this comes and we get back into church, I think they need to be front and center. I think kids need to see what's going on to appreciate it. I never understood the side bit, and you know what? They make a joyful noise, so I think that's fine.
So just so you know, we don't, the parents prefer to sit there for behavioral reasons so they can make a quick exit if they're not able to put the wrath of God on them. So
I inherited my mother's look, so usually the kids are pretty quiet.
God, but this is another reason why bringing the altar down There was also another proposal that did not make it, but I'm telling you, we were on the eve of considering, is what Betsy talked about, bringing screens into the church. Now, you want to talk about some excitement then there might be some more opinions. But the screens were a way that you could engage the west and east transept. Bringing the altar down enables us to engage those families with children that still prefer to sit there because they can make a quick escape. Now,
I saw that in Florida when I was visiting last year with my niece. They had a couple of, I think I told you, Chris, a couple of big, large screens. I think it's mostly for the fact that a lot of the older people, the church was a very small church, but the whole service, instead of in a handout, was done on the screen. So it was, really big type. And I think the senior members of the church liked it. I also now, will that eliminate the use of Eucharistic ministers? Now
so there'll be another town hall meeting if we have a follow the bouncy ball in liturgy. Although I've seen it done, and okay, it's a little odd for me. But you also need to know all the prayer books and hymnals have been removed. Anything that you receive coming in, you have to take out with you. And so screens will work some places. I'm relieved that is not where we're going now. This seems to be a good way to engage liturgy for all ages, and particularly those who can't even walk upstairs. So I don't know, low-hanging fruit to do a lot for us, I believe. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just wanted to tell you about the children part, because that's a big piece for our conviction, is engagement for families with children.
Michelle, I noticed you asked a question about Eucharistic ministers, and I think, and that would include the acolytes and everything else, that unfortunately during this phase and the next phase, we will not be able to do. But when we have a vaccine and people are being vaccinated, there seems to be no barrier to us bringing everything back as far as those people go.
Marty Smith, I think I saw you had your hand up. You can unmute yourself. I don't know if I can. I can try. Hold on. Marty, I think you're still muted, so we can't hear you.
Okay.
There you are. Great.
All right. I'm an interloper from St. John in the Wilderness, Flat Rock, North Carolina, but I am your former parish administrator for many years. And I have to say that this conversation did not start just now. I can remember Father John Lawrence saying he went into the church when he first came and scooted down in the pew and tried to see what a child would see. And he said they couldn't see anything. And so they didn't see anything going on, and they weren't being taught. So that conversation started back then. He did not move the altar, but that was the thing, that the children and the family needed to be able to see what's going on. And so I understand what you're going through, because we have a historic church, so we can't do too much with it, and we have to go through architectural committees and stuff. So I commend you, and all of your words today were very good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, my family was definitely one of the transept people. We chose the east transept so we could keep our kids separated from all the other kids, so we had maybe a better chance of holding it together. And what's interesting is that my kids were the ones, you'll notice that more recently, we were sitting in the front row. My kids wanted to see, thank you, dog. My kids wanted to see the altar. They were the ones that said, no, we need to move over there. So there's this yearning that we should be feeding without question. Was there anybody else? Alex.
I also want to say, Marty, thank you, because I want everybody to know today, this journey did not start with us. We are just at a place to say yes to it. It started way back when, and Betsy will tell you, the because George Muir wanted to remove carpet, turn the pews, and we've done that, and it was not greeted with a lot of love. So indeed, what we're doing now is living into the conviction of what we should be doing, and it was started by the Spirit a long time ago. So we shouldn't be too entertained with ourselves, because this thing's been going on for a long time.
Alex and Sarah, you guys had a comment?
Yeah, comment and question. First, I'd like to thank you, Nick, and Mike, and Father Chris, and Reverend Donna, and the entire vestry for moving us forward in this challenging time. Speaking on behalf of the entire congregation, thank you. Thank you for doing that. And our question is, are we able to do anything outside in limited, potentially if have to be limited by reservation only, services outside a couple times a week, so we could bring groups together to be in person physically? And if not services, because of rules by the diocese, could we do other types of physical gatherings that would be more fellowship oriented, like picnics or, you know, other things we could come up with that would allow us to come together, even if we had to stay 6 feet apart? That's better than not being together, in my view. And then if that's not allowed, could we do something that's not sanctioned?
So I can answer,
Like
yeah,
at our house.
to that. Great question. Let me see. Confessionally, I've been to a few graduation parties where there were 10 by the power of 10 present, where I thought for the first time in my life I was going to have to run from the police. But so there has been a lot of things going on in the community where you see some flexibility being exhibited. The question is, can we exhibit that flexibility? Kevin and I had a meeting on Friday looking at how can we bring all the young people together. We know that it can't be on church property, knowing that it's going to be more than 10, but are we comfortable doing something outside of church property? And so Kevin and I are in conversations about that. So the answer is yes. If we do it on the church property, whether it's inside or out, the same calculus exists. And if you do worship outside, it becomes more complicated because I need more people involved to move stuff. And there's always the variable of the environment. So it's, yes, we can do it. Of course, we've done it before. It was called Mass on the Grass. And there's some innovation, but it's still, the numbers are still the same on the property. Off the property, I think that if people took the idea of hosting at their house, the same way we do with our dinners, I think that's a great way to perhaps have cookouts at your house. And what you do with those numbers are up to you and the comfort of people coming. Now, my attorneys are going to tell me we're still liable, but that's what they do. They tell me we're liable. So yes, but we still have to pay attention to certain things. And I think it's a great idea because we're in a few weeks going to do it with young people. They need to come together for sure. So.
Betsy, did you have something else you wanted to share?
One thing that I've seen in other video things is the prayers can be put up on the screen so you don't have to have the digital bulletin. And also with the off-site meetings, I think that's a creative idea, but I think everyone has to be aware that each person and each family has their own level of comfort, and you can't pressure people into, I mean, I have not left my house except to take a walk since March 12th. I have gone nowhere. And, you know, that's my life, and it could be my life for a couple of years. So, you know, everyone makes their own decision, and you have to respect that. And I think offering the opportunity is great. But if someone can't feel comfortable doing it, you've got to respect that.
Absolutely. No question. That's love in action, right? That's respecting the dignity of every human being. And that's part of who we are. So I would expect if we did do something along those lines, or, if it were among groups of parishioners on their own, it would be, invite. And everybody has to make their own choices in how they move forward with this. Anybody else have any other comments or questions, concerns? We had pretty good attendance today. Thank you so very much, everybody. Like I said, this is a conversation we want to listen. We are united under the umbrella of Grace Church, but we are not, it's unity without uniformity, and I recognize that. And that is part of honoring the dignity of every human being. So I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody. Billy, Ganada, yes.
Yes. Well, I must admit, at the beginning, to me, I feel the Holy Spirit ascending to the altar. And sometimes stairs are difficult for me. And with my knees now, I can no longer kneel at the altar rail. But I feel it when I'm there at the altar rail. But I must say, after hearing all of this, I can't use the word convinced, but I'm hopeful. And, it does basically sounds like a good idea to me.
Thank you.
My question is, I thought somewhere in the letter to us, there was a hint that maybe something else would be coming, more changes to the physical space. Maybe I misread this, in the future. I just have one plea. And I love our church very much. I love the physical space, and we've been, going for 30 some years. And as you know, well, I don't even know, but anyway, our son is there in the columbarium. So it is a very special space for me. I would hate to see the furniture, the pews removed, and our church turned into something that looks like an auditorium. That scares me. I don't know what your future plans are. I hope you leave the pews alone, other than the ones you're already removing. Anyway, I just want to say that.
So I can say thank you. To be honest, I could retire in a few years. My first vote was just leave me alone and let me retire, because I knew that this would be an energetic conversation. I can also say that at some point I'd love for you to come and look at what a rush chair can do for the space in terms of flexibility. The pews are I have to be honest, in my own house, there's not agreement about this. I'm not a pew lover, and Julie and the girls love pews. But it's a very difficult piece of furniture. Now, what's going to happen in the future? Nobody can know that. I'm hoping you all let me retire and leave before this conversation comes up again. But yeah, the one thing I do know is that the worship space since 1860, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, 1860, see, we've looked at the stain colors, the pews that are in there aren't original pews, they don't match. There have been multiple changes over its history, and I can only say there will probably be multiple changes to come. Now, what are those changes? I don't know, because if I was that good, I'd play the stock market or something. But I would say be flexible and let the Spirit touch you where you find yourself without a lot of projection forward, and let's just see. The last thing we want to do is take the Holy Spirit away from you. Matter of fact, I want to do the opposite. I want to infuse you with the Holy Spirit. So I appreciate that. So trust us. Let's be together as a community, and just breathe and take steps and see. I hope, the columbarium, it concerns me, because what if the church doesn't make it? That space is significant, right? And so I've had some people already call me asking if they should remove somebody from the columbarium because they have a sense that the church may not make it. Now, Grace and the demographics are a little bit different. It's a neighborhood parish. I don't think, I think we're going to see some change in the composition of attendance and what that looks like, even when we get into stage 5. So my deepest hope is that we're able to keep that building going in a relevant way that communicates what you feel about the Holy Spirit. So I don't know. Selfishly, young clergy, I pray for them because I just don't know. It's a scary, scary time for the church. And I teach Gumbyism. I don't know if you've ever watched Gumby. Flexibility, maximum flexibility is the soup du jour. That's French, right? Did I speak French? So
Somewhat.
I just threw it in there just to try to impress you. But the mega churches, I don't know how they're going to make it because they have to have huge numbers to meet their budgets. We own our building, so we have flexibility around things if we're careful. If we're careful with staffing and what that's going to look like, I have no idea what that's going to look like. My guess is it probably will change our staffing composition. So flexibility and openness, and I think that is where hope is generated from. I also want to say this too, that because we're doing, and John, God bless him, his technical, what we're doing now, holy cow. It was tough when we started in the home. Then we got better at it. Today was the first day in the church. And we'll get better and better and better at it. But you all need to know you can participate in the service. Because if you can record yourself, you're in, right? So you can read, you can do prayers of the people. If you say nice things, I'll let you give a reflection. So there's so many things that could be done in this period of time that we can never let go of. I have people that watch us from Florida. The Delaney's watch us from Tennessee. I hear from them. So our outreach has already increased. And people in these places continue to support us prayerfully and financially. So it's got to continue to go.
Kevin, yeah, I see you got your virtual hand up.
Yeah, put it on mute.
Oh, Kevin, you're on mute.
Am I muted now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Am I good? Yeah, just huge appreciation for this community, for how we just love each other, come together. So much going on. And Father Chris just shared, I mean, if people say nice things, he'll let you do a reflection. Pastors don't do that. Pastors don't have the tradition of having members of the congregation share. I've always appreciated how wonderful that is and a testament to our community. Personally, as an African American, I've received so many outpourings of love and support from members of many people on this very call, people in the community. It just reminded me when Father Chris said, yeah, if you say something nice, I'll let you give a reflection. It's such a great community, and whatever it is we end up being, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. So I just want to share huge appreciation to the community and just affirm that we'll move together. We'll move together. So that's it.
I would love to send a note to all living clergy telling them where we are today. Wouldn't that be cool?
You can do that on Facebook. I mean, you can say anything you want to. You can send out a general letter.
That'd be fun just to thank them for contributing to where we are today. That's what I think.
Anybody else have any questions or things they like to share before we wrap up? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, everybody, again. What a great conversation. I'm going to echo what Kevin said. What a great community. How much we've grown together in service of that love for each other and our broader community and the world at large. It's beautiful and heartwarming. And it's really an honor to serve this church and be with you. Thank you. We'll make this available online. So if any of your friends or anybody you know wasn't here, it'll be available. So the conversation's there so that other people can listen in and understand how we're all feeling as we go forward. So thanks again. Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll be seeing you all soon, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Bye, everybody.
See you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks for a great job.
Thanks, Dirk.